A poor single father counted his last $18 at the bus stop every morning. A wealthy surgeon watched him from her car, touched by his love for his son. When a gunman's bullet flew toward him, she made a split-second choice that would change 3 lives, forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching, also like and subscribe for more stories. Daniel Rodriguez clutched his worn leather wallet, counting the crumpled bills for the 3rd time. $18.47. That was all that stood between him and his next paycheck, still 3 days away. His 8-year-old son Miguel sat beside him on their small apartment couch, carefully coloring in a book they had borrowed from the library. "Papa, are we poor?" Miguel asked without looking up from his drawing of a superhero. Daniel's heart clenched. At 32, he worked 2 jobs, morning shifts at a construction site and evening shifts stocking shelves at a grocery store. His wife Elena had died 2 years ago from cancer, leaving him to raise Miguel alone. The medical bills from her treatment still arrived monthly, constant reminders of their loss. "We're not poor, mijo," Daniel said softly, running his calloused hand through Miguel's dark hair. "We just have to be careful with our money." Miguel nodded, accepting his father's words without question. That was the thing about 8-year-olds. They trusted their parents completely, even when those parents were barely holding their world together. The next morning, Daniel woke at 4:30 a.m. as usual. He made breakfast for Miguel, scrambled eggs and toast, the same thing every morning because it was cheap and filling. Miguel never complained, even though Daniel knew his son was tired of eating the same food every day. "Remember, Miguel, Mrs. Garcia will pick you up after school and take you to her house until I get home from work," Daniel said as they walked to the bus stop. "I know, Papa. Will you read to me tonight?" "Always," Daniel promised, kissing his son's forehead before the school bus arrived. After Miguel left for school, Daniel waited at the same bus stop for his own ride to the construction site. This was his routine every day. The same corner, the same bench, the same 6:15 a.m. bus that would take him to another day of hard labor. What Daniel didn't know was that someone had been watching him and Miguel every morning for the past 3 months. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in her car across the street from the bus stop, drinking coffee and observing the father and son with growing curiosity and concern. Sarah was 38 years old, a successful pediatric surgeon who lived in a beautiful house just 6 blocks away from Daniel's apartment building. She drove this route every morning on her way to the hospital, and she had started noticing the same man and boy at the bus stop. There was something about their relationship that touched her heart. The way the father's face lit up when his son spoke, how he always made sure the boy was warm enough, adjusting his jacket and checking his backpack twice. The gentle way he kissed his son goodbye each morning. Sarah had never married, never had children. Her career had consumed her life for the past 15 years. She was one of the youngest department heads at Metropolitan Children's Hospital, respected by her colleagues and feared by medical students. But watching this father and son made her feel something she had pushed away for years, longing for a family of her own. She began to notice small details. The man's work clothes were clean but worn. The boy's backpack was held together with duct tape. Their shoes had holes that had been carefully patched. Despite their obvious financial struggles, there was love between them that money couldn't buy. One particularly cold morning, Sarah saw the boy shivering while waiting for his school bus. His jacket was too thin for the weather. Without thinking, she almost got out of her car to offer help, but stopped herself. She was a stranger. It might seem inappropriate or suspicious. Instead, she did something else. That evening, she drove to the local clothing store and bought a warm winter jacket in the boy's size, along with gloves, a hat, and new shoes. She left the bag on the bus stop bench very early the next morning with a note that simply said, "For the boy who waits here, from someone who cares." When Daniel and Miguel arrived at the bus stop that morning, Miguel's eyes went wide with wonder. "Papa, look! Someone left presents." Daniel read the note with suspicion. Who would do such a thing? Was it safe? But seeing his son's excitement and feeling the quality of the warm jacket, he made a decision. "What do you think, Miguel? Should we keep them?" "The note says they're for me," Miguel said logically. "And I'm really cold in my old jacket." Daniel helped his son put on the new jacket. It fit perfectly. For the rest of that day, he wondered who their mysterious benefactor could be. Sarah watched from her car, her heart warming as she saw Miguel's joy over the new clothes. It was a small thing, but it made her feel more connected to humanity than any surgery she had ever performed. Over the next several weeks, Sarah found herself looking forward to her morning observations. She learned their routine completely. The man, she still didn't know his name, worked construction during the day and another job at night. He looked exhausted most mornings, but never failed to be patient and loving with his son. Sometimes she would see them sharing a piece of fruit for breakfast, or the man giving his son his own gloves when the boy's hands looked cold. These small acts of sacrifice made Sarah's chest tight with emotion. She began leaving small gifts occasionally. Nothing too expensive or obvious, just things that might help. A box of nutritious snack bars left on the bench. A gift card to the local grocery store tucked under the bench where only someone sitting there would find it. Once she left a book of crossword puzzles because she had noticed the man doing them while waiting for his bus. Daniel started to look for these mysterious gifts, and Miguel began calling their unknown helper the bus stop angel. Daniel was touched by the stranger's kindness, but also worried. Why was someone watching them? What did they want? One morning, Sarah's routine changed unexpectedly. There had been an emergency at the hospital. A child had been brought in after a serious accident, and she had to go in early for surgery. She drove past the bus stop 20 minutes earlier than usual and saw something that made her stomach drop. A man in a dark hoodie was approaching the bus stop where Daniel and Miguel were waiting. Even from a distance, she could see that something was wrong. The man's body language was aggressive, and he seemed to be arguing with Daniel. Sarah pulled over and watched, her hand on her cell phone ready to call police. The man approaching Daniel was Rico Morales, someone from his past that he had hoped never to see again. Rico had been Elena's brother, and during her illness, Daniel had borrowed money from Rico to pay for treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. It was a decision born of desperation and love. "Time to pay up, Danny boy," Rico said, his voice low and threatening. "You owe me $15,000 plus interest. That makes it $22,000 now." "Rico, please," Daniel said quietly, trying to keep his voice calm for Miguel's sake. "You know I'm good for it. I just need more time." "You've had 2 years," Rico snarled. "My patience is gone." Miguel pressed closer to his father, sensing the tension even though he didn't understand what was happening. "Not here," Daniel pleaded. "Not in front of my son." "Your son?" Rico laughed bitterly. "Elena's son, you mean? The boy should be with family who can actually take care of him. Look at you, you can barely afford to feed him." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Miguel is my son. Elena was my wife. We are family. Elena would be ashamed of how you're raising her boy," Rico continued cruelly. "Living in poverty, wearing donated clothes. He deserves better than this." Sarah watched from her car, her heart pounding. She could see the distress on both the man's and the boy's faces. She was reaching for her phone to call police when everything changed in an instant. Rico pulled a gun from his hoodie pocket. "I'm done waiting, Daniel. You're going to sign custody papers giving me Miguel, and then you're going to disappear. The boy will be better off without a father who can't provide for him." "No," Daniel said firmly, stepping in front of Miguel. "I'll find a way to get you the money, but I'm not giving up my son." "You don't have a choice," Rico said, pointing the gun at Daniel's chest. Sarah saw the gun and didn't hesitate. She threw her car door open and started running toward the bus stop, her phone already dialing 911. But she was too far away and everything was happening too fast. "Papa?" Miguel whispered, frightened by the weapon pointed at his father. "It's okay, mijo," Daniel said softly. "Stay behind me." Rico's finger moved toward the trigger. "Last chance, Daniel. Sign the papers or the gun fired," but the bullet didn't hit Daniel. In that split second before Rico pulled the trigger, Sarah had reached them. Without thinking, she threw herself between the gun and Daniel, taking the bullet in her shoulder and spinning to the ground. The sound of the gunshot echoed off the buildings. Miguel screamed. Daniel dropped to his knees beside Sarah, pressing his hands against the wound to stop the bleeding. "Call an ambulance," Daniel shouted to anyone who might hear. Rico stood in shock, the gun falling from his hands. He had never intended to hurt an innocent woman. In panic, he ran, leaving Daniel holding the stranger who had saved his life. "Why?" Daniel asked Sarah as she lay bleeding on the concrete. "Why did you do that?" Sarah's face was pale, but her eyes were clear. "Because," she gasped, "someone had to protect you. Someone had to protect him." She looked at Miguel, who was crying beside his father. Within minutes, sirens filled the air. Police cars and an ambulance arrived at the scene. As the paramedics worked on Sarah, she grabbed Daniel's hand. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen," she whispered. "I work at Metropolitan Children's Hospital. I've been watching you and your son. You're a good father." "Why were you watching us?" Daniel asked, confused and grateful and terrified all at once. "Because," Sarah said as the paramedics prepared to lift her into the ambulance, "you reminded me of what love looks like." At the hospital, Daniel waited in the emergency room with Miguel while doctors worked on Sarah. The police had taken their statements and assured Daniel that Rico would be found and arrested. But Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the woman who had taken a bullet meant for him, Dr. Sarah Chen. The name was familiar, but he couldn't place it. A nurse overheard him asking about her and provided some information. "Dr. Chen is our head of pediatric surgery," the nurse explained. "She's one of the best doctors we have. She's saved hundreds of children's lives." Daniel felt overwhelmed. A famous surgeon had risked her life to save his. But why? Hours later, a doctor came to update them. "Dr. Chen is stable. The bullet missed major arteries, but she'll need surgery to remove it and repair the damage. She's asking to see you." Daniel and Miguel were led to Sarah's room. She was awake but groggy from pain medication, her shoulder heavily bandaged. "How are you feeling?" Daniel asked awkwardly. "Like I've been shot," Sarah replied with a weak smile. "But I'll live." "How's Miguel?" The boy had been quiet since the shooting, traumatized by the violence he had witnessed. He stayed close to his father's side, holding tightly to Daniel's hand. "He's been through a lot today," Daniel said. "We both have. I don't know how to thank you for what you did." Sarah looked at Miguel with gentle eyes. "You don't need to thank me. I did what anyone should do." "No," Daniel said firmly. "Not anyone would have done that. Most people would have called the police and stayed in their car. You could have been killed." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something? I've been watching you and Miguel for months. Every morning I drive past your bus stop on my way to work. I've seen how much you love each other, how hard you work to take care of him." Daniel's eyes widened. "You're the bus stop angel. You're the one who's been leaving the gifts." Sarah nodded, suddenly embarrassed. "I hope that doesn't sound creepy. I've never had a family. I've devoted my whole life to my career, and seeing you two together made me realize what I was missing." Miguel stepped closer to Sarah's bed. "You saved my papa," he said quietly. "Thank you." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. "You're welcome, sweetheart." Over the next week, Daniel visited Sarah every day after work. Miguel came with him, gradually warming up to the woman who had protected his father. Sarah was fascinated by the boy's intelligence and kindness, and Miguel was amazed to learn that Sarah was a doctor who helped sick children. "Do you fix kids who are broken?" Miguel asked during one visit. "I try to help them get better," Sarah explained. "Sometimes kids get sick or hurt, and I do operations to make them well again." "Like how you're getting better from the bullet?" "Exactly like that." As Sarah recovered, she learned more about Daniel's struggles. The medical bills from his wife's cancer treatment. Working 2 jobs just to pay rent and buy food. The constant worry about Miguel's future. Daniel, in turn, learned about Sarah's life. Her dedication to medicine, her success but also her loneliness, how watching them had awakened a longing for connection she had suppressed for years. "I never thought I wanted children," Sarah confessed one afternoon while Miguel was coloring in a hospital coloring book. "I was so focused on my career. But seeing you with Miguel, seeing how love can make even poverty bearable, it changed something in me." "Being a parent is the hardest thing I've ever done," Daniel admitted. "But also the most important. Miguel is everything to me." Sarah watched Miguel carefully coloring within the lines, his tongue sticking out in concentration. "He's lucky to have you." "We both are," Daniel said. "If you hadn't been there that morning..." He didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what would have happened. Sarah was discharged from the hospital after a week, her arm in a sling but otherwise recovering well. She insisted on giving Daniel her phone number, in case of emergency, though they both knew it was really because neither wanted to lose the connection they had formed. Life returned to a somewhat normal routine. Rico had been arrested and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. The debt he had demanded was deemed illegal by the courts, since it involved threatening a child's custody. Daniel felt a weight lifted from his shoulders, but 3 weeks after the shooting, a new crisis emerged. Miguel had been complaining of headaches for several days. At first, Daniel thought it was stress from the traumatic experience at the bus stop. But when Miguel started vomiting and became dizzy, Daniel knew something was seriously wrong. He took Miguel to the emergency room at Metropolitan Children's Hospital, hoping Sarah might be working. She wasn't on duty, but the attending physician ran tests and discovered something alarming. Miguel had a brain tumor. Daniel felt his world collapse. First Elena, now Miguel. How much loss could one person bear? The attending physician, Dr. Williams, explained the situation gravely. The tumor is in a very delicate location. Surgery is possible, but it's extremely risky. We'll need our best pediatric neurosurgeon for this case. Who is your best? Daniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. Dr. Sarah Chen, Dr. Williams replied, but she's recovering from a recent injury. I'm not sure she'll be cleared for surgery yet. Daniel's heart pounded. Sarah, the woman who had saved his life, might now be the only one who could save his son. When Sarah received the call about Miguel's condition, she was at home recovering from her gunshot wound. Her shoulder was healing, but she still had limited mobility and wasn't cleared for surgery. She rushed to the hospital and reviewed Miguel's scans with a heavy heart. The tumor was indeed in a dangerous location, wrapped around critical brain tissue. One wrong move could leave Miguel paralyzed or worse. I need to do this surgery, she told Dr. Williams. Sarah, you're not cleared. Your shoulder. My shoulder is fine, she interrupted, though they both knew it wasn't completely true. This boy needs me. Daniel was waiting outside Miguel's room when Sarah found him. His face was streaked with tears, and he looked like a man facing his worst nightmare. Sarah, thank God you're here, he said. They told me about the tumor. Can you? Is there anything you can do? Sarah sat down beside him, her expression serious. The tumor is operable, but it's going to be the most difficult surgery I've ever performed. And I have to be honest with you, I'm not at full strength yet. My shoulder isn't completely healed. Daniel's face went pale. Are you saying you can't do it? I'm saying I shouldn't do it, Sarah replied carefully. But I'm also the best chance Miguel has. The question is whether you trust me to operate on your son when I'm not at 100%. Daniel looked through the window at Miguel, who was sleeping fitfully in the hospital bed. His son looked so small and vulnerable, surrounded by medical equipment. Will you tell me the truth? Daniel asked. What are Miguel's chances? Sarah took a deep breath. With the surgery, assuming everything goes perfectly, he has an 85% chance of full recovery. If complications arise because of my shoulder, that drops significantly. Without surgery, the tumor will continue to grow. He might have 6 months. Daniel closed his eyes, the weight of the decision crushing him. Trust the woman who had already saved their lives once, or watch his son slowly die. There's something else you should know, Sarah continued. I've never performed this exact procedure before. I've done similar surgeries, but nothing in this precise location. Miguel would be. He would be helping me learn. The honesty was brutal, but Daniel appreciated it. You saved my life, he said finally. You've been watching over us like a guardian angel for months. If anyone is going to save Miguel, it should be you. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. Sarah spent the entire night studying Miguel's scans, consulting with colleagues around the world, and preparing for every possible complication. Daniel didn't sleep at all. He sat beside Miguel's bed, holding his son's hand and telling him stories about his mother, about how proud Elena would be of how brave Miguel was being. Papa, am I going to die? Miguel asked in the early morning hours. Daniel's heart broke. No, mijo, Dr. Sarah is going to fix you. She's the best doctor in the world. She saved you from the bad man, Miguel said sleepily. Now she's going to save me too. That's right, Daniel whispered. She's our guardian angel. At 6 a.m. they wheeled Miguel into surgery. Sarah was already scrubbed in, her injured shoulder carefully supported by a special brace that would allow her to operate. She had insisted on a team of the hospital's best surgeons assisting her, knowing she might need backup if her shoulder failed. I'll take good care of him, she promised Daniel as they prepared to begin. The surgery took 8 hours. Daniel paced the waiting room, unable to eat or sit still. Other families came and went, but he remained, counting every minute. Sarah's shoulder began to ache 3 hours into the procedure, but she pushed through the pain. Miguel's life depended on her steady hands and unwavering focus. She had never wanted to succeed at anything more in her entire life. At hour 6, complications arose. The tumor was more extensive than the scans had shown, wrapped around nerve clusters that controlled Miguel's motor functions. Sarah had to make split-second decisions about how much to remove without causing permanent damage. Her shoulder was screaming with pain now, but she refused to stop. This boy had become like her own child. She would not let him down. Finally, after 8 grueling hours, Sarah emerged from the operating room. Daniel jumped up from his chair, his face desperate for news. "He's alive," Sarah said, and Daniel's knees nearly buckled with relief. "I was able to remove 95% of the tumor. The remaining 5% can be treated with targeted radiation therapy. He should make a full recovery." Daniel started crying, overcome with gratitude and exhaustion. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for saving my son." Sarah's eyes were bright with tears too. "Thank you for letting me." Miguel's recovery was slow but steady. The radiation therapy eliminated the remaining tumor tissue, and within 3 months he was back to being a normal 8-year-old boy. The experience had changed all of them. Sarah had proven to herself that she could care about something more than her career. Saving Miguel had been more satisfying than any professional achievement she had ever accomplished. Daniel had learned that accepting help didn't make him weak, it made him human. Sarah's presence in their lives had shown him that there were still good people in the world willing to sacrifice for strangers. And Miguel had learned that heroes came in many forms. Not just superheroes in comic books, but real people who chose to be brave when others needed them. The medical bills from Miguel's surgery should have been devastating for Daniel's finances. But Sarah had quietly arranged for the hospital to write off all the charges as a charity case. When Daniel found out and tried to protest, Sarah simply said, "You can't put a price on family." Family, that's what they had become. Sarah started joining Daniel and Miguel for dinner once a week, then twice, then almost every night. She helped Miguel with his homework and taught him about science and medicine. Daniel cooked meals for her when she worked late at the hospital. "Are you going to marry Dr. Sarah?" Miguel asked his father one evening. Daniel nearly choked on his coffee. "Miguel, why would you ask that?" "Because she loves us," Miguel said matter-of-factly. "And we love her. And she makes you smile the way you used to smile at Mama." Daniel looked at his son, amazed by his wisdom. "Do you want me to marry Dr. Sarah?" "Yes," Miguel said without hesitation. "Then she could be my mama too, and we could all live together." 6 months after Miguel's surgery, Daniel made a decision that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. He was going to ask Sarah to marry him. He had no money for an expensive ring, but he had something better. A handmade proposal that involved Miguel and captured the uniqueness of their relationship. On a Saturday morning, Daniel asked Sarah to meet them at the bus stop where everything had begun. She arrived to find Daniel and Miguel waiting with a small picnic breakfast and a sign that read, "Our bus stop angel, will you be our forever family?" Miguel ran up to her with a ring pop candy, the kind children gave each other as pretend engagement rings. "Dr. Sarah, will you marry my papa and be my mom?" Sarah looked at Daniel, who was kneeling on one knee with a simple but beautiful ring. Not expensive, but chosen with love. "Sarah Chen," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life, you saved my son's life. And most importantly, you saved our hearts. We love you more than words can express. Will you marry us?" Sarah was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you both." Miguel cheered and hugged Sarah around the waist. "Now we're a real family." As Daniel slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger, she realized that this bus stop, the place where she had made a split-second decision to protect strangers, had become the foundation of the life she had always wanted but never known how to find. 1 year later, Dr. Sarah Chen Rodriguez stood at the same bus stop with her new husband Daniel and her stepson Miguel. But this time they weren't waiting for a bus. They were there for the dedication of a small memorial garden the city had installed to commemorate acts of everyday heroism. The plaque read, "In honor of ordinary people who do extraordinary things for strangers. Do you think other people will be brave like you were, Mama Sarah?" Miguel asked. He had started calling her Mama Sarah after the wedding, wanting to honor both her and his birth mother's memory. "I think," Sarah said, putting her arm around her son, "that people are braver than they know. Sometimes they just need the right moment to discover it." Daniel smiled, remembering that morning a year and a half ago when his biggest worry was having $18 to last 3 days. Now he worked as a project coordinator for a construction company, a position Sarah had helped him get by vouching for his character and work ethic. Miguel was thriving in school and had started a club for kids who wanted to learn about medicine. "I have something to tell you both," Sarah announced, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and nervousness. Daniel and Miguel turned to look at her expectantly. "We're going to have another member of our family," she said, placing her hand on her stomach. "You're going to be a big brother, Miguel." Miguel's eyes went wide with joy. "Really? I'm going to have a baby sister or brother?" "Really?" Sarah confirmed, laughing as Miguel hugged her tightly. Daniel felt tears in his eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure," Sarah said. "I never thought I wanted children, remember? But this family has taught me that love multiplies. It doesn't divide. We have enough love for 10 children." As they stood there at the bus stop, surrounded by the small garden that represented hope and courage, Daniel reflected on the journey that had brought them together. A moment of violence had led to connection. Tragedy had led to love. Strangers had become family. "Do you ever regret it?" Daniel asked Sarah quietly while Miguel ran around the garden, too excited about his future sibling to stand still. "Regret what?" "Taking that bullet. Changing your whole life for people you didn't even know." Sarah looked at her husband and son, then placed her hand over their growing baby. "Daniel Rodriguez, that bullet was the best thing that ever happened to me. It gave me everything I never knew I wanted." 5 years after that fateful morning at the bus stop, the Rodriguez family had become a symbol of hope in their community. Sarah continued her work as a pediatric surgeon, but now she also ran a foundation that provided medical care for families who couldn't afford it. Daniel managed the foundation's community outreach programs, using his own experience with poverty to help others navigate difficult times. Miguel, now 13, volunteered at the hospital and had already decided he wanted to become a doctor like his stepmother. Their daughter, Elena, named after Miguel's birth mother, was 4 years old and had inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's kind heart. The bus stop memorial garden had become a place where people came to reflect on the power of small acts of kindness. Sarah and Daniel often brought their children there to remind them that heroes weren't just in storybooks. They were ordinary people who chose to do the right thing when it mattered most. One evening, as they sat in their backyard watching Miguel teach little Elena how to kick a soccer ball, Sarah turned to Daniel with a smile. "Do you remember what you told Miguel when he asked if you were poor?" "I said we weren't poor, just careful with money," Daniel replied. "We were poor then," Sarah said gently, "but we were rich in ways that mattered most. You had love for your son that couldn't be bought or sold. That's why I fell in love with both of you before I even knew your names." Daniel took her hand, still amazed that this brilliant, successful woman had chosen to share her life with them. "And now? Now we have everything," Sarah said, watching their children play in the fading sunlight. "Not because of money or success, but because we chose each other. We chose to be a family." Rico Morales had served his time in prison and upon release had sought out Daniel to apologize for the pain he had caused. The encounter had led to his own transformation, and he now worked with at-risk youth to help them find alternatives to violence. Even he had become part of the ripple effect of that morning at the bus stop. As the sun set over their neighborhood, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. A split-second decision to protect strangers had led to a lifetime of love, purpose, and family. The bullet that was meant to destroy had instead created something beautiful, a testament to the truth that love really can conquer all, and that sometimes the most broken people can become the most powerful healers. 10 years after the shooting at the bus stop, Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, she had taken Daniel's name after their marriage, was giving a speech at a medical conference about the intersection of medicine and social responsibility. 10 years ago, she told the audience of doctors and nurses, "I thought success meant saving lives in the operating room. And it does. But I learned that sometimes the most important surgery you can perform is on your own heart, removing the barriers that separate us from our humanity." In the audience, Daniel sat with their 2 children. Miguel was now 18 and had just been accepted to medical school on a full scholarship. Little Elena, at 9 years old, had announced she wanted to be a bus stop angel when she grew up, helping people who needed kindness. After the speech, a young resident approached Sarah. "Dr. Rodriguez, your story is inspiring. But I have to ask, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't driven past that bus stop that morning?" Sarah smiled. thinking of all the lives that had been changed by that single moment of courage. "I don't wonder about that," she replied, "because I believe we all get chances to be heroes in small ways every day. The question isn't what would have happened if I hadn't been there. The question is, what opportunity to help someone will you notice today?" As they walked out of the conference center together, their family surrounded by the warm glow of evening, Sarah knew that the greatest gift she had ever received wasn't her medical degree or her professional success. It was learning that love has the power to transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. One bullet had changed everything, not by destroying, but by creating connections that would last for generations. And somewhere in the city, at a bus stop that now bore a small plaque about everyday heroes, new stories of courage and kindness were being written every single day. The circle of love continued to grow, touching lives in ways that Sarah, Daniel, and Miguel would never fully know. But they had learned the most important truth of all. When you choose to protect others, you don't just save them, you save yourself too.